Hello and welcome AP Bio to our video lecture on chapter 41.1, Community Ecology. We got a lot to cover, so this one's going to be a little bit bigger. So I want to start off with a big explanation because this is going to really define all the community interactions we talk about, which is niche. So habitat and niche sometimes get mixed up. Habitat is where you live, and niche is that role you're filling. And when niches start to overlap, two organisms are trying to fulfill the same role, that's where we come into conflict, and that's where we're going to have some of these interactions butting heads. So most organisms evolve to fill a different niche, so their niche doesn't overlap with any other species, so that you can live in the same habitat in harmony. So a great example is this picture here where we have 5 different birds. They all live in the same habitat at this pond, but because each one has adapted different traits to secure resources in a different way, they all live in harmony. So there's no conflict. So the flamingos are so tall, they're able to go deep. Ducks can dive, so they're going to go for slightly different food. Also at the depth, the avocets are going to be a little bit higher up on the shore, and they're skimming the water with that really long beak. Oyster catchers, strong long beak dives into the sand for things that burrow, and plovers are just picking at insects on the surface. So all of them live in the same habitat, but they're filling different niches and getting their resources different ways, so they're not in conflict. And when we're talking about niche, it's important to remember that a fundamental niche is everywhere you could live. So most organisms could live more places than they actually do. But because those niches will start to overlap with other organisms, they have a much smaller realized niche, or where they actually live. So for example, these barnacles on the seashore, these Cthalamus barnacles could live all up and down this hillside. But the Balanus barnacles are much better at securing resources in the water. So they're going to take over those lower regions. But the Balanus barnacles don't do so well when they're dried out. So the places where the high tide reaches, most of the time there is no water there. Since the Cthalamus are better adapted to those drier conditions, they're going to live up there, whereas the Balanus will take over the wetter conditions. So partitioning that area, so they're not in competition anymore. And competition is really what drives niche. So this is a struggle between individuals, and this is always a minus. Even though one is better and is going to win, you have to spend additional resources to win. And so that's going to drive down your success because you're spending energy to compete. So there's 2 types, interspecific or between different species, or conspecific or intraspecific, where it's within a species, like these 2 anemones around my head here, competing for the same resources. Anytime you have conspecific or intraspecific competition, that's going to result in that uniform distribution pattern we see, because they're going to space out so they're not overlapping. So what does competition cause? Well, first off, it causes competitive exclusion, which means if you have 2 different species who both use the same resource, like these Astraeanella and Synedra diatoms who are using up this silica, both of them can be successful. So this is their fundamental niche. But when you grow them together, one of them is going to be successful and the other one just can't compete. It's not going to be able to compete. So it's either going to die off, or it's going to have to do something else. So if you don't want to die off as a result of competition, maybe you're going to try resource partitioning. So this is where you're going to shift what you're doing, or where you're doing, or how you're doing, or when you're doing it, so that your niches no longer overlap. So this could be going after the same food, but at different times of the day. This could be shifting where you are in a tree. This could be shifting what you're eating in a tree. This is an example with warblers. There's different species of warblers living at different elevations within a tree. So they're going after different resources because different things will live at different heights in the tree. As a result of this partitioning, we can see over a long period of time, you'll start to see character displacement. So say I have 2 birds that both eat bugs. But one of them is much better. It's much faster at catching all the bugs, so the other birds can't compete. So over time, if they start eating hard nuts that they have to crack open, the ones that survive and pass on their traits are going to have bigger beaks that are better at crushing nuts. So that population is going to start to shift, or they're going to displace that character of beak size. So this is how we start to see ecological factors contributing to evolution. Another form of community interaction that really drives a lot of our characters and our traits and evolution is predation. So this is a plus minus because one benefits and one does not. And it's not just animals. So plants, herbivory. This is predation, but where you eat plants, also a plus minus. One cool thing is, much like prey has adaptations to survive, so do plants. Here you can see these little trichomes or little hairs that prevent bugs from being able to feed on them. There's all sorts of plant adaptations to fight herbivory. And both of these things with competition are going to lead us to this red queen hypothesis. So Lewis Carroll famously once had the red queen in his story Tell Alice. It takes all the running you can do just to keep in the same place. If you want to get somewhere else, you must run at least twice as fast. So what does that mean? It means that if you stand still, everybody else is going to pass you by and you're going to lose. So species must constantly adapt. They've got to perpetually fix their niche so that they can stay alive, because other competitors are coming for their resources. Predators are coming to eat them. Parasites are coming to infect them. And so if you want to stay ahead and survive, you've got to also develop new traits in order to keep pace and stay with those predators. Same with predators. They've got to keep pace because as their prey gets stronger, faster, quicker, smarter, they have to develop traits so they can keep catching them. So it's kind of a back and forth that you see there in evolution. What does predation cause? Well, some of these red queen adaptations are things like coloration changes. So here, whoa, an octopus just appeared. Cryptic coloration or camouflage, designed to trick predators. Aposematic coloration. These are warning signs. So whenever you see really bright yellows, oranges, blues in nature, typically those animals are poisonous. So it advertises a threat to potential predators like, hey, you don't want to mess with me. It's going to be worse for you. Another strategy is mimicry, so trying to hide in plain sight. Batesian mimicry is where a really harmless species tries to pretend to be a tough, harmful species. So here we can see a hawk moth larva, a little bug that looks like a snake. And so birds won't eat it because they think a snake is in the tree and they want to avoid getting eaten, when really it's a harmless larva. Malarian is very similar to aposematic. So this is where multiple harmful species develop traits similar so that all the birds know, don't come after me, I'm a stinging bee. Now, not everything results in minus interactions. We have other things like mutualism, both benefit, that's a plus plus. Parasitism, plus minus, one benefits, one really hurts. And commensalism, where one benefits and one's not so bad. So like a bird in a tree. Tree's not really harmed, that's a 0, but the bird gets a house, that's a big plus for it. So let's go through some of these. Mutualism is our plus plus. This is where best friends in nature start to develop. So organisms where they team up because they can do better together than they can by themselves. Sometimes they hunt together. Sometimes one gets a meal while the other one gets parasites off of it. Sometimes it cleans out things that could cause infection. And it's important to know that a lot of scientists actually think altruism in humans is a evolutionarily developed trait. So mutualism is making these best friends. Parasitism is how we get immune systems. Parasitism is the most popular lifestyle on the planet. Half of animals are parasites, and if you include bacteria and fungi, balloons way higher. And so we've developed an immune system, and it's not just us. While mammals have really complex immune system, I talked about how plants have immune systems to prevent herbivory. Bacteria developed CRISPR to fight off viruses. So it's a really common thread. And the last thing I want to talk about is facilitation. So these are things that have a positive effect on lots of other species in the community without necessarily being in a symbiotic relationship. So these are either plus plus or plus zeros. So for example, beavers build dams, which block up rivers, which create eddies or little places for the water to slow down. This creates habitat for other organisms, which allows them to be successful. Juncus grass allows for more plant species to be present in salt marshes because it secures the soil, allowing for less erosion, and it puts nutrients into the soil so more plants are able to grow. So these are builders, and while they may not necessarily benefit from the others, they're certainly contributing huge benefits to others. So that's it for 41.1. Hope you enjoyed it. All right, how do I end this video? Stop.